I got my, visual aid, brought it, put it at the table, wrote my outline, put my visual aid back, started recording, realized I got the visual aid for the recording. What was I doing? The No Direction Network owes a lot of its origins to my gaming groups. I was playing in a group that, included Jay, my original co-host, Matt and Kathy, who later took over, and Tina, who, in and out co-host, and of course, my wife. But at the time, just another gamer, then girlfriend, then wife. So obviously, in-person gaming has completely reshaped my life. And I haven't gotten into this much, but one of the reasons my passion for Pathfinder rekindled enough to relaunch this podcast is that I ended up in a new in-person game. My friend Will, who's been on the podcast once, it was a long time ago, but he gets mentioned in anecdotes. He reached out. He said that he's got his idea for this homebrew campaign and wanted me to join, which I made the time for in my schedule, something I haven't had the time for a long time. And once I sat at the table, once I started playing again, it reminded me so much about what I love about role-playing happens around a physical table. Now, I'm not disparaging virtual tabletops. They are one of the greatest innovations in the hobby. They're the reasons TTRPGs saw so much success and growth during the pandemic when any other form of gaming was shut out, very difficult or impossible. And they've opened up gaming to people who can't get into a physical game. Maybe they're isolated. Maybe they've got social anxiety. Like any reason that you cannot get to a physical table, virtual tables are there for you. And they're now a fundamental part of the role-playing hobby, represent a future of gaming I never even dreamed about when I got into gaming 30 years ago. But for me, personally, in-person gaming not only got me into this hobby, but made me understand who I am. And there's so much the in-person experience that virtual tabletops have yet to capture. Starting with dice. Dice are iconic to tabletop role-playing. The D20 is a symbol of a tabletop role player. Our clicky-clacky math rocks do not clicky and they do not clacky with the same tactile feedback when you roll a virtual dice. I, presumably like you, have a lot of dice. Typically, I choose a color scheme that captures the vibe of my character and buy a couple of complementary sets of dice in those colors. I then designate one as the primary set and mix in a few from the secondary set for the dice that I tend to roll in multiples. Perfectly normal behavior. In Will's campaign, my dice actually inspired my character. They set the course that my character was going to go on. At Gen Con 2023, I came across Baron Smellybones' scented dice booth. They had, I believe, 3 sets of scented dice. They had an ash-scented set for fireballing, a perfumey set for general arcane scents, and I grabbed Nature's Embrace. A pine-scented dice set. So when Will reached out to me and said we was putting a game together in person, I told him didn't matter what the setting was or what the themes were going to be or the storyline. I was playing a druid because I already had the dice for it. As far as the scent goes, it's kind of exactly what you want it to be. When I open up my dice case, when I open up the box that the dice come in, the room does fill with a piney scent, but subtle, minor, and it doesn't distract. It makes a statement. It's just a fun little gimmick and something that I've been looking forward to the opportunity to play with these. I do play with physical dice in virtual tabletops, but I bought these dice specifically knowing that one day I would get to show up at a game table, say, I'm playing a druid and I smell like this. Another element that you can pretty much do on a virtual tabletop, but it's just not the same, is your miniature. I'll always remember Param's face when I asked him if he thought most people knew what their character looked like. Very rarely in the decade or so that Param and I podcast together did I ever stump him silent. But the fact is, I usually have a vague, amorphous idea of what my character looks like. It's all vibes. And the same goes for other characters in the group. I know their souls. I don't need to see their faces. When it comes to miniatures, I was happy to have an approximation until Hero Forge. When Hero Forge happened, now I had a tool to ask myself, how focused is my character's forehead? what shirt would they wear if they were, an animated character and they had to follow the same character model every single episode. I really think that once Hero Forge came into my life, and as it has improved over the years, I got what other people got out of like knowing what their characters looked like. Now, sure, once again, I've used Hero Forge miniatures for PCs and virtual games. It's obviously more customizable, environmental, and ethical than getting AI art. But getting a miniature in hand, and shout out to Shelby in my group for letting us treat her 3D printer like it's the group's 3D printer. That lets me connect with the hours I spent tweaking my miniature to perfection. Even if it's all gray and some of the details got smoothed out, I can see and hold my character. I should mention, my 10-year-old daughter is in Will's game. I've GM'd for her a few times at home, one-on-one. This is the first time we're in a full group, and we're both players in the game. She's a bit quiet at the table. I think she's still feeling out how role-playing works, but she confirms every time I double-check with her that she really is enjoying it, and whenever we are scheduling it, she looks forward to that date. But her enthusiasm for the game was never more palpable than when she asked to make her own Hero Forge miniature. And we sat down at my computer and had the kind of bonding moment every gamer parent hopes for with their kids. She went through every single step. We jumped back and forth when she made changes. She got new ideas. And it was amazing watching her actualize this character that she knows in her head what she wants it to be and how she wants her character to look, and her character's horse, because her obsession with horses extends beyond just, riding lessons and being a horse girl in real life. She also has to play a horse girl in a role-playing game. So she got her miniatures from Shelby, and we played for that session, and we didn't have a combat in that session. We played a chase scene, more theater of the mind style. And I could tell that it was kind of bugging her, and at one point she even said to Will, like, she points at the battle mat that's set up in the middle of the table, and she's like, how come we're not using the mat? And it wasn't just a curiosity about Will's GMing technique. It was, how come I can't use my cool new miniature on this mat? And as soon as we left that session, her first session with her 3D printed miniatures in hand, she asked if I could take out my paints when we got home. Miniatures and dice are the big accessories that you get to play with at a gaming table, but there's so many more little things that add to the in-person experience, including so many more accessories. I like toys, and not just, figuratively, dice and miniatures are toys. I've used a literal action figure as a game aid. Vitruvian Hacks is a super articulated action figure line, and when I was playing a luchador-themed brawler in a past campaign, also a Will campaign, I used an action figure at the table to illustrate my acrobatic wrestling maneuvers. And also, if I was between turns and things were happening, I often posed my action figure to be reacting to what was happening. It wasn't a distraction. It showed my investment in the story, even when I wasn't directly involved. Another accessory I had in that campaign, and one I really wish I could find, it's somewhere. It was a hit point tracker. Something I do that I know annoys other people is that as much as I can, I try to avoid using character sheet numbers in inter-character conversations. Not necessarily in-character conversations. Well, okay, absolutely in-character conversations. But inter-character conversations, that like between role-playing and totally meta-talking, where you're just kind of having a top-down summary of the conversation that's probably happening between your characters. I still try to nudge that a bit into a role-playing direction and away from just being dry and very gamey. And that includes healing, which represents a scene that's so dramatic, multiple of the longest-running TV shows in history have been medical dramas. And yet at the tabletop, after combat, the healer will say, like, how much damage did you take? And figure out the best healing spell for the number, and completely skip the drama of having just been, gnarled on, gnawed on by a dragon, or, scorched by its breath. So this HB tracker was a slider with a heart on it, and it could be pinned to your shirt. And by adjusting the position of the heart, you have an idea of the percentage of hit point you've lost. It shows this in a non-numeric way, but it illustrates how much of a beating you've taken so far. What's fun about these accessories and, the dice and the miniatures is that it extends the tabletop experience beyond the tabletop. When I'm at a gaming convention, if I see scented dice, or if I see somebody that has put together a clever gaming accessory that I know I could use at my table, then I am excited for the next time I'm doing something in person. And I have yet to see yes, you can read about the latest innovations in virtual tabletops, but as somebody that often already gets tripped up by the last round of innovations for virtual tabletops, I don't get excited about those. I actually kind of dread them. But seeing an HP counter or smelling dice at a gaming table, it just makes me excited to show these things to people, to show them off, to use them as they are intended. But I am surprised to say that you don't need an accessory specifically designed for gaming to elevate the gaming experience. When we arrived for the Session Zero for Wills campaign, Will surprised everybody by giving them color-coordinated notepad, portfolio, and pencils. And yes, this is just kind of the standard color of a pencil, but everyone had a different colored eraser. The person with the blue portfolio had a blue eraser. Green had green, etc. And unfortunately, because I got there last, I didn't get the green one. That would have gone really well with my character. But, flowers are pink. Druids smell flowers. Anyway, it was this small little gesture that showed Will had been thinking about the game and shopping for the game. And like me when I'm shopping at a game store or a convention or really a stationery store, it showed that this campaign was following him beyond the table. And it made me that much more invested in this new campaign. Finally, let's talk about the dynamic of in-person gaming. I've talked a lot about the elements you can touch at the table. Now I want to talk about the feel. Being in a room with people triples my awareness of those players, if not more, and therefore my connection to them. I'm someone who spends a lot of time online, including in voice calls, and have been since BBS days when I was in high school. And I still can't tell the look of someone on camera, whether they are giving me their full attention or reading their character sheet or looking up a rule. More importantly, I'm more aware of the GM. I can see what they're doing. I can tell where their head is at when I'm in person with them. And if they need a little bit of time to think about something or to look something up, it's easier for me to keep track of that. There's so much subtlety to communication that's lost or approximated in an online forum. And while that's fine for a work call or a podcast, role-playing is when I feel most like myself, and I want to be able to go full speed ahead as my perfect self, because that is the experience that made me a role-playing gamer, that made me a gamer for most of my life, a podcaster for half of my life. It is the ability to fully be myself that lets me pretend to be somebody else. And if role-playing is when I feel the most like myself, role-playing in person is when I feel like myself the most. Here's my theory. In-person gaming is a 5-sensory experience. And if you count your character and your own senses separately, then we're up to a 10-sense experience. It took me being away from it for years to make me realize how important gaming in person is for me. Of course, now that I've got an in-person game meeting my deepest gaming needs, I'm happy to get in on more online games. Maybe that's how I'll fit more Pathfinder Society into my schedule next year. Thank you for joining me for another episode of No Direction. If you want to know more about this little gaming community we've carved out for Pathfinder, Starfinder, and Essence 20 fans, check out NoDirectionPodcast.com. There you'll find links to our Discord and social media pages. And if you want to help us keep the network going, you can support us at patreon.com/NoDirection. Until next time, if you want to find the path, you need no direction.